Hey everyone, welcome to Vic's Yard to Table. Today we're making authentic Neapolitan pizza dough with 4 simple ingredients. Just flour, water, salt, and yeast. Simple ingredients, traditional techniques, and great results. For Neapolitan-style pizza, we need these 4 ingredients. 00 flour, some water, fine sea salt, and some yeast, and that's all you'll need. I've really been enjoying this Caputo 00 flour. It really is the gold standard for authentic Neapolitan pizza. The 00 actually refers to how finely it's milled. It's really soft and powdery, which helps create that classic light, airy crust. It also has the perfect protein and gluten structure, so the dough stretches easily without tearing, which is huge for hand-stretching Neapolitan dough. When I'm cooking it at really high heat in my wood-fired pizza oven, you really get those beautiful leopard spots, a puffy cornicione, and a tender center. If you really want good Neapolitan pizza, this is the flour that I believe makes the difference. When it comes to Neapolitan-style pizza, water actually plays a pretty big role in how the dough turns out. I start with clean, filtered, neutral-tasting water, and then I cool it to get it between 50 and 55 degrees. When you keep the water cooler, it helps control the yeast activity so the dough develops more slowly and more evenly. Now you have that slow fermentation that builds better flavor and better structure and helps create that light, airy crust. And that's what Neapolitan pizza is famous for. To get the water to that temperature range, I'll add ice cubes and then I check it with a thermometer until it lands right between about 50 and 55 degrees. That little bit of temperature control really makes a difference in the final dough. Salt does a lot more than just make the pizza taste good. I'm using fine sea salt because it dissolves evenly and blends smoothly into the dough, so the flavor is balanced and consistent. Salt enhances the natural flavor of the dough, but it also helps regulate fermentation by slowing the yeast activity down just a bit. That gives the dough more time to develop structure, strength, and better flavor instead of rising too fast. So fine sea salt isn't just about seasoning, it's an important part of getting that lighter texture, great gluten development, and authentic Neapolitan dough character. For authentic Neapolitan pizza, there's a Neapolitan Pizza Institute. It's also known as the AVPN, and it recommends using fresh yeast. Fresh yeast will help give you a really clean, steady rise and a great flavor in the dough. Now, only a small amount is used because a slower fermentation lets the dough develop more structure and flavor and that light, airy texture that we're looking for. But if fresh yeast is not available, dry yeast works just as well, but in smaller amounts since it's more concentrated. You usually use about half the weight of the fresh yeast. The yeast is essential because it produces carbon dioxide gases that makes the dough rise. It also contributes to that perfect chew and soft crust. For this recipe, I use the entire 1 kilogram bag of the 00 flour. That allows me to make 7 pizzas, and each pizza weighs 230 grams. Each of the dough balls will stretch out easily to make a 10-inch pizza, which is the perfect size for my pizza peel that I use for launching my pizzas. I then weigh out 600 grams of water, which is equivalent to 600 milliliters of water. Then 30 grams of salt. Then I weigh out my dry yeast to 1 gram, but if you don't have a scale that's that accurate at lower weights, you can use approximately 1/3 teaspoon or use a heaping 1/4 teaspoon if you don't have a 1/3 teaspoon. Then I add the sea salt to the water. I put the cap on the jar and then I shake it up for a little while to dissolve all the crystals completely. Once the water turns clear and I don't see any grains left, it's fully mixed and it's ready to use. Now that the salt's completely dissolved, I add it to the stand mixer. Make sure you don't add the yeast directly to the salt water though. At first mix in about 10% of the flour, which is roughly 3/4 of a cup from this 1 kilogram bag. This doesn't have to be exact, it doesn't have to be precise, but this small amount of flour does act as a buffer, and then it protects the yeast from the salt. Otherwise, it can slow down or even stop it from working. But by giving the yeast some flour to start feeding on first, it stays active and ready to help the dough rise properly. Next, attach the dough hook and turn on the mixer to its lowest speed. This lets the flour gradually absorb the water. Mixing gently at first helps everything come together evenly before we add the yeast, so the flour is fully hydrated and ready for fermentation. It also lets the gluten start forming gradually. It looks like the flour's absorbed the water, so now I'm adding the yeast. So the next thing we do is add the rest of the flour while the mixer is still running on low. This gradually helps the dough hydrate evenly and prevents dry pockets from forming. Usually, I'm letting the mixer run from anywhere between 10 or about 15 minutes. And I'm just basically waiting till the dough comes together and there's a smooth, slightly sticky ball with a good gluten structure. As far as for hydration in Neapolitan-style pizza, the ABPN states that it should be between 56 and 62.5%, which means that the water is about 56 to 62.5% of the flour weight. So with this recipe, we're right inside those guidelines at 60%. I like to use a flexible spatula on the side of the bowl to kind of get the dough off there and the flour as it's sticking to the sides. At this point, I'm watching the dough more than the timer. You'll know it's done when it starts pulling cleanly away from the sides of the bowl, looks smooth and slightly glossy, and forms one cohesive mass. When you press it with your finger, it should slowly spring back and feel tacky, but not sticky. Once the dough is finished mixing, I like to pull it off the hook and make sure it's not sticking to the sides of the bowl as well. This ensures it's fully incorporated and not clinging to the edges. After that, I cover the bowl and let it rest for about 20 minutes. This short rest is often called a bench rest. So the bench rest allows the gluten some time to relax, and that helps make the dough easier to handle when we shape it later. It also gives the flour time to hydrate, which improves the texture, and it helps the dough rise evenly. So while the dough is going through its 20-minute rest, I like to get the proofing trays ready. So I make sure they're clean, put a little bit of olive oil in there, brush it along the bottom, brush it along the sides, and that's going to help keep the dough balls from sticking when we put them in the proofing trays later. So after the bench rest, it's time to take the dough out of the mixing bowl. I gently gather it and I shape it into a smooth round ball, folding the edges underneath towards the center as I go. This tucking motion creates a surface tension on the outside, and that helps the dough hold its shape and makes the top more smooth and cohesive once it's formed into a ball. I then let it sit uncovered for about 15 minutes. This short resting period lets the dough relax a little more, making it easy to stretch and shape later. It also helps the gluten structure even out. So once the dough has had its short rest period, it's time to divide it up into individual portions for the recipe. So what I usually do is about 230 grams of dough balls, and that'll give me a total of 7 dough balls. After weighing out each portion, I start shaping them into balls. There's a lot of different techniques for this, but the method I currently like to do is to fold the dough in on itself and pinch underneath. I gently tuck the edges towards the center and I press lightly so the seam gets fully closed as I rotate the dough. I keep the bottom tight so the top stays smooth, which creates surface tension. Sometimes I place the smooth side on the bottom hand and rotate it while pinching with my top hand between the inside edges of my thumb and index finger in order to close the seam. This tension helps the dough hold its round shape and makes handling it much easier during the final rise. As I shape each dough ball, I watch for a taut, uniform top. That's a good sign it's ready for the final rest before proofing. I'm using proofing trays that are 17¼ by 13 inches. This works really well for me with this recipe because with 7 dough balls divided between the 2 trays, each one has plenty of space, which makes it easier to remove them later without tearing them. It's also especially helpful if you're just starting out on your pizza making journey to have more room. It also helps the dough rise evenly and develop a better texture. So I like to let the dough rest in the trays for anywhere between 8 and 24 hours. How long you actually need to let them rest depends on your home's temperature. If your home is warmer, the dough rises faster. If it's cooler, it's going to rise slower. I aim for about 12 to 16 hours of proofing. This timing ensures that the dough has enough rest to develop flavor and structure without overproofing. On a final note, I also wanted to mention, no matter how things turn out, you can always improve. There's always some aspect of either the ingredients, the technique, the timing, or handling that you can work on, so every batch has a chance to get better. One of the most important things when working with dough, or really anything in life you're trying to improve upon, is quality repetition. The more you practice the process, the more comfortable you will become with it, and the better your results will be. The more you shape and fold dough, the more intuitive it becomes, and the better your pizzas will turn out. This is actually the beginning of my YouTube journey, and I appreciate you for watching and following along. I hope these tips help and you get great results. If you enjoyed the video, feel free to like, comment, or subscribe. I'd love to hear how your dough turned out and if any of this information was useful. My next upcoming video is going to be my pizza sauce recipe with homegrown San Marzano tomatoes and hydroponic fresh herbs. Thanks again for watching.